4, how are you? How you doing? We're getting into holiday mode here, so hope you've been enjoying the last couple of episodes. If you haven't checked them out, pop onto the YouTube channel or to our Twitter, but we'll tell you more about that later. Nick, last week's session we talked about, or episode, we talked about you going into your new coaching role. How was that?
Yeah, so last Thursday I went down to, I watched a bit of the under-12s coach working, and then I watched somebody, I think every club has one, right? He's the groundsman, he does the laundry, he does a bit of coach, like football survives on people like this, or sport survives on people like this. And he took the session, so I watched him do an hour or so with the first team, which gave me a good idea, the chance to kind of just watch some of the players. It's a talented group of players. We've got players that have played 30 or 40 professional games in the league, and some youngsters kind of coming up. So it's a good mix of talented players, most of which have been at professional clubs at some stage. So yeah, it's going to be fun. And then I met all the youth coaches last night through this, clearly, on a Zoom call. So I introduced myself to them, met them, talked a little bit about some of the plans. So yeah, it was cool. How's your week been?
It's been all right. I think coming to this time of month for some people, or of December, for some people it's wind up time. So some sports, when they, especially kind of COVID, has said we're not going to have competitions till April or May, foot's off the pedal a little bit around competition and prep. Other sports are still kind of moving around the schedule and keeping that consistency there. So it's been varied. It's kind of just teasing it out. Whatever coaches want to stay in contact, in the lead up to the Christmas holidays. I'm doing a community of practice with some coaches tonight at 9:00. So that's just a check-in, a festive check-in. I think it's important as well, though. It's been a really tricky year, an uncertain year. So that getting together and just having a quick, like, how you doing? What are you going to take into 2021? That kind of check-in. So it's not been as busy, but me being me, there's loads of little projects on the go. So keeping myself busy. But I'm hoping to take my foot off the pedal on Friday and ease into the trip home next week.
Very nice. Yeah, we've still got rugby coaching again next Sunday, which will be Christmas hats and jumpers, which will be interesting because this Sunday was sideways rain and wind and very cold. So I'm not quite sure how the Christmas jumpers and hats would work in that kind of environment. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
So I'm an indoor sport person, came from that world. Stop now. Don't tell me in that wind and rain you were lapping that up. What kind of difficulties do you think, I mean, obviously football background, weathered and adapt all your sessions, going to rugby, same, but the age group's younger. Like, what kind of things are you facing?
Well, I mean, massive frustration on Sunday. So very cold, very wet, very windy. Like, wind does weird things to kids as well, right? Like, makes them go a bit crazy. I've always thought that. And the RFU rule at the moment, because of COVID, around gloves. I'm doing this like you don't know what gloves are. I like gloves.
Thank you. I'm aware now.
So the rules say that kids can't wear gloves unless they change them every 15 minutes. Now, I don't know many parents of 6 and 7-year-old kids in our case that have 5 pairs of gloves for kids to wear at coaching. Right. So, like, it's the worst thing for kids that playing rugby. If as soon as they get cold hands and they can't catch, they can't throw, you've lost them. Like, we had kids go home on Sunday because they were so cold. And coaches, putting kids' hands between theirs and just trying to warm them up. Now, I was fine. I had 3 pairs of gloves on. You ever seen that clip in Dumb and Dumber, where he sat on the back of the bike for ages, and he takes off and he's got 2 pairs of gloves on, so he gives some. I felt a bit like that at times because that's what the rules are saying, and
right.
Like, little kids, such a low risk vector in terms of sharing COVID, and I get that, but where do we find that balance between Maslow's hierarchy of looking after kids and being warm and okay versus that? And I think it's a really tricky balance to make, really tricky.
Did you do any kind of adaptations to the session, what kind of adjustments were you able to make in those conditions on Sunday?
Well, the adaptations to the session really were just more about keeping the kids on the move. We did one game that I think the kids were too static in, which was kind of like a rob the nest type game of 4 groups going, but we had kids passing the ball back. And I went into that kind of over enjoying myself mode with, so when the kids were off robbing other balls from other areas, as soon as they were coming to the area that I was in charge of, I was like, no, Christmas is closed, go away, go and find another area. And I just got way too into it. But it kept the kids warm. But then we did a game, and this is an interesting question for you. So we did a game that was based upon 4 corners and 2 teams of 4, and kids are kind of like rugby netball. So you got to stand still and pass it, can't run. Got to get the ball into a particular corner to score. The game just did not work, except about one kid. I'll tell you about him in a minute.
Okay.
What do you do? What advice have you got, Jen, for coaches that are doing a game or practice and it's just tanking for whatever reason? What do you do? How do you approach that?
Move on. Short answer. I think, both in the teaching world and then coaching, I know you can say they overlap. It's like sometimes we become so either worried or obsessed, whatever way it is, to stick to the plan. And we've planned this plan, we've written it down, meticulous detail, we've shared it already, everyone knows what we're doing, we think we're going right. And then we're not really feeling and seeing what's going on. We're not really seeing the boredom creep in and the little bit of giddiness that's veering, to the left, or people are cold or distracted. So it's the move on is the immediate answer. Now, are we then assuming that coaches in this instance have the ability to not just identify, but then know how to? Does it go back to a little bit to how you kind of pitch your session? So if you think, you mentioned a couple of episodes about differentiating, are you planning your session for the middle group and then you have a higher, I know wrong terminology in some aspects, but like a higher adaptation or like an easier version of it? Or are you setting it at like rock bottom level, basic level, and build twice on that? Or pitch it at the highest kids that you have, the hardest version of it, and then come down 2 levels? So, and I've chatted to different people in and out of different environments and how they might go about it. But I'd say just kind of look and see what's happening. Know who your target audience is in that group, of who get it, who's demonstrated, who's creating different cool patterns of play or giving you different adaptations. And then being able to say, right, actually, you know what, I'm getting nothing back. For whatever reason, really giddy over in that corner. Have I paired them wrong in that group? Are they standing around too long? Like if you weren't there being, warm gestury with your 19 pairs of gloves, would that line be too long? Or is there then movement that you can put in at extra moves at each station? Or like in rugby's case, where there's some rules similar to kind of netball and footwork stuff, like do you add movement for the sake of movement? Or do you say, actually, if the rule is I need to backward pass here, well, this age group needs to move in this condition, so I'm just going to let them move anywhere and pass anywhere to get something else out of it, and not being afraid at that moment if you don't know what you're going to get out of it. So I definitely say move on. And that's the case, like we've talked about, being creative, being fun, looking at your audience and going, right, come on in, what do you see? What would we change here? What would you like to do? And then move from it.
Yeah, it's definitely, so there was 2 of us, 2 coaches running that little group of 8 at the time, and I was kind of just watching, and I'm kind of going through in my head, right, why is this not working? What's the reason? Is it the rules? Is it the size of the area? Is it understanding how to play the game? Is it the kids? Are they just, is it something, the weather? What is it that's affecting things? And I'm trying to kind of go through this checklist of different things. And whilst being that kind of assistant coach role, so the guy that was leading it is a level 2 coach, knows a lot more about rugby than I certainly do. And it was tricky. And then post that, one of the other coaches came over and we were having a conversation about stuff. And he said, I just get frustrated so much that the kids don't really seem to get any better at catching and throwing. And I'm like, well, maybe we need to do more practices that get them catching and throwing.
Gosh, there's a lot in that, I think one of the things that struck me there is the way you were analyzing that. So say you're fortunate to be in that situation where you have a coach, assistant coach, or two people coaching in a space. How I think that's so important to have that conversation, whether it's the start of the season, the start of a session, of if you notice anything, or if there's a checklist. Like, the coach might not have the capacity to identify that something's not working and come up with a change, either to move on to the next thing or to adapt what's there. So actually having that tag team live for someone to say, I've noticed this, this, and this. If we just tweak it, you don't need to revamp everything, and then things could move on. Also, we talked about last week about reviewing and reflecting on the session. So that's a nice time to come in and go, right, why didn't that work? How was it something in the primer that we set out where we didn't look, the giddiness was really high and we just then went to something that was really flat, or we added to that and then they were off being electric. So yeah, a lot in that.
Yeah, it's that reflection in action type stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
The ability just to stand back and go, right, this really isn't working. And I think it was down to the rules in the end, because of how the game was kind of set up, that it just didn't work because of that, and we didn't get to grips with it quick enough.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I think that I'm conscious of as a coach, but I don't know much about rugby, and which probably makes me like a lot of parent coaches, I guess, that get thrown into it at the bottom end that might not be their sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
It must be really tricky.
Yeah, I'd say so. And also the responsibility of taking a team. So that's now your team. Or you started off in a volunteer role and all of a sudden then you're taking a group of 6. And then you're supposed to row in with what the drills or whatever the other coach is doing. And you're going to watching and going here. So yeah, I think a little chat at the start of a session. Look at who in your plan you're targeting. And not that plan needs to have like teeny tiny granular details in it, just needs to have some of the key things you've mentioned there. If they feel that catching and sending and receiving, throwing and catching is really important and we're maybe not as sharp on it, then drip feed that the whole way through all the sessions that you have in different ways.
I need to tell you about one kid though. So this kid turned up. I wasn't there last week, but this kid turned up last week for his first session, and he had these big bottle thick glasses on, blonde hair. He looked like Shakespeare. And the other coaches have kind of gone, okay, this could be tricky here. And they were talking about it on the WhatsApp group. And he was in my group for the game that didn't really work. Oh my God, this kid can play. Like, your unconscious bias of what you think an athlete or a rugby player or whatever your sport looks like, he doesn't look anything like it, but wow. As I was watching this practice unfold in front of me, and the 7 kids out of the 8 that just couldn't do it, this kid, he moved into space. I bet when you're talking about 6-year-olds that tend to just kind of hone in on me and the ball. He was moving into space. He was intercepting the other team. He was passing with deception. He understood the concept of the game. And then we went and played Bulldog at the end. The classic, a few people in the middle, you've got to get from one end to the other without getting tagged. And I said to one of the other coaches, I said, first time I've seen him, he'll and there's 30 odd kids. I'm like, he'll be in the top 3. Guaranteed he'll be in the top 3. And he had a sidestep that so all of the kids would come towards him and he'd just throw this sidestep. And you've got like 8 6-year-olds that would just disappear off the pitch. And this kid just kind of just drifted round. And he's a talented kid. He's a talented kid. Certainly compared to his peers at the moment, he has some gifts. I've got no idea. Nobody has about whether he's going to go on and be a elite, whatever. But from first glance, if this is the first time or second week he's ever played rugby, I'm interested now, right? What's happened before? What has he done in that 0 to 6 bit? Because is he a natural games player, or has he done something that's helped him be able to grasp concepts of games and have some hand-eye coordination very quickly? Because something's gone on.
That's cool. It's also a little bit terrifying that if you do find the answer out and we share it, that other parents or coaches are going to be like, all right, I need to do that with the kid.
Well, that's the
Back to
danger, isn't it?
our
Yeah,
10,000 hours faux pas.
yeah, yeah.
Like I'm thinking of the coach in that instance, and whether it's, you know, that athlete that's come along, or it's somebody in your team that gets selected for an academy or a regional team. Like, how do you think that impacts other sessions thereafter as a coach? Or like what can we say, like from our own experiences, that it's like for a coach then to rethink what you have in front of you? Does it add extra pressure?
I think it changes your planning.
Right.
And that will be certainly something that, I guess I'm looking at it from different lenses really now. So in my assistant coach under sevens rugby world, where I'm way out of my depth, but I'll be putting on the coaches WhatsApp group, how do we plan for him? Like, what does the session look like for him? Because there's also a girl in the group who's deaf, and so she ended up in one of the practices that I was leading, like this little kind of cat and mouse chase game.
Yeah.
And I had to very quickly adjust my position. So like she was right in front of me. So she's getting better at lip reading, but I have to be really conscious of that. So, but she has some kind of physical movement challenges as well. So in this group now, we've got the deaf girl with some very different movement capabilities to this super talented lad relative to the rest of the group. So the question that I'll be putting to the rest of the coaches is, right, how do we plan for that? How do we group the kids? How do we organize the practices so we can help both of them?
Be interesting to see what they come back with, because and I know we have a chat with one group of people in our world, and they'll say, why plan for him? Let's just have a session and see what he excels in. Others are saying, absolutely, challenge and stretch. And then we're looking at inclusion. So we're making sure that, like, if you have those 36 of any ability that turn up, how can you make them feel like they're in the game and they're learning? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a tricky one. I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer until you explore, especially if Shakespeare's turned up, to have a look and see what else he has in the back.
That's his code name now.
That's his code name.
Just going to call him Shakespeare.
Yeah. Where are his areas for improvement? What excites him? Why is he there?
Yeah.
And the assumption that some coaches will be, well, he's good, equally sign he wants to be the next Johnny May. So then we should train him like that, or in that position, as opposed to tapping into, like, what did you enjoy in the session today? Well, I got to hang out with this group over here and they're new people. And and all of a sudden you're like, okay, so not as pressured on the coach to make sure he has the top range of drills ready to, I keep saying drills, but activities ready to engage and afford different opportunities, as opposed to something that is just fun and engaging.
Yeah. Or he might not be bothered about the rugby bit at all. And actually he might want to just help the little deaf girl, and he might feel really empowered from helping her.
Yeah.
So it's interesting though. So I've got these two dynamics really. So I've got the challenging the coaches about what they think we can do to help different groups of kids, and then at the seniors end, at the football side now. So I've been added to the players WhatsApp group. Quite a big moment. I felt quite emotional about that. And so having kind of met 14 of them that were training last week, so I put a question on the WhatsApp group, which was, what do you think you need to get better at as an individual? What do you think we need to get better at as a team? And how can we as a coaching staff support you to get better at those things? So I'm kind of getting the players' input there into the content that they need to get better at. Mm-hmm. But we've got the difference between novice and expert in terms of the athletes. So at what stage do you think you start to get the players' input into what they want to get better at? Or should we try that with the 6 and 7 year olds now?
God, that's really interesting. I say 6 and 7s all the way, but change our language, obviously, because similar to Well, all the different environments I'm involved in actually at the moment, there's a couple of people in each of those spaces who are just not used to answering questions.
Yeah,
They
well,
go,
that's the same at the seniors end. Some of
right,
them haven't come back because
yeah,
they've never been asked before.
no. And the initial maybe assumption from some people is when you go into a room and there's that like silence piece, you kind of go, oh, they're not interested, or they don't know, they've nothing to contribute, I'll move on. And in some cases, holding the silence a little bit longer will bring to surface the typical people who speak or the usual people. But actually, if we have that intermittent, kind of like I think what we said in the episode before about dropping a question in early, or for people who are shy or maybe need that extra processing time, we'll, say, we're going to talk about this 24 hours in advance, or give me your answer to the question on Friday. Now, I know with 6 and 7 is a bit different, but like asking a question and normalizing that Q&A, not like overstretching the question so they're loaded with, oh gosh, I have to think about everything today. And now it becomes, oh gosh, please don't ask me a question. And more about a space where you're kind of going, we're really interested in you. We're really interested in why you're here, what you found out about this, what you found out about yourself. We explore post-game with the West Ham girls, like, what did you take away from that session? What did you take away from that game? We might use the word learning sometimes, other times it could just be a conversation. So it becomes less about everything kind of, how do you feel about it, which is brilliant if you can share that, but what's the deeper message here so we can impact the next session? Higher end, obviously, but 6 and 7 still there. If you normalize it at that age, and then by the time they're 12 or 13, they're going, hey coach, what do you think if I do this? I feel I could do that way. And you're kind of going, yeah, take that.
Yeah, what I like in that there is normalizing it. Like, understand the response that you might get from a little one, which would be very different to the old ones, but you're starting to ingrain the habit of them doing it. As soon as you were talking, then it reminded me. So years ago, I used to run an under-8s football team, and there were a conversation of under-7s and under-8s, a combination, sorry, of 7s and 8s. And we had one kid in the team, James, who, like, he was only there because his brother played and his brother was a year old. A single mum couldn't take him to 2 different places, so they came to us, right? And he was never bothered about football, but he was, as a kid, he was hilarious. He was brilliant. And I can still remember after one game, sat the kids down at the end of the game, and we never won a game all season, right? We drew one game. I'm sure that story about that moment will come out.
Yeah.
And it was a big one. And I can still remember saying to the kids, right, what stuff do we need to get better at in training this week? And I can still picture it now. I sat on this 4G pitch, and Aaron saying to me, oh, I need to get better at my passing. Jack saying to me, I need to get better at my shooting. And James, this kid, goes, eating chicken. And I've gone, what? Sorry? He's gone, yeah, I've got to get better at eating chicken this week. I was like, okay, right.
Stop.
Bang, welcome to the world of a 6-year-old. Yeah. But so just like, but I guess what you're saying is I'm starting to normalize his ability to think about something he wants to get better at and then voice it, right?
Yeah. And like, I guess in our world, a lot of the time, loads of questions, loads of disruptions, a lot of the key words in kind of the plan, do, review, the reflection. It's an everyday part, both in our own practice and in others. So sometimes just one question is enough. And, when you introduce, we may go with like, bells and whistles and all the energy, and they're going, whoa, who's this man here with 5 gloves on him? So like, it'd be interesting to see what the response is, and actually any bit of traction, whether it's from last year's captain or one coach who didn't have a say before. Sometimes when you open that door, people come out of the woodwork and they have loads of things to say, and we just need to give them time to do that. And sometimes multiple options, maybe not live in a conversation. WhatsApp, brilliant avenue. Private message me if you don't want to do it in the group.
Right. That's what they've all done. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. And then you start to see who feels comfortable. And I've seen it as well in the Basketball England program. Some people started in October sending private reflections and part of some of the activities we're doing to my message to Brian, who's working with me. By November, everything was in. Everything was on Spond app. Everybody is communicating, sharing challenges, opening up, and it's brilliant. It's not saying it's all going to be daisy and brilliant and fantastic all the time, but that's the transition they've made, because we normalized and we said, at your own pace. Here's a question we're going to throw in. We care about you. We want to know the answer.
Do you think some of them have found it difficult?
Definitely. you're looking at, say, if I use the basketball group in particular, we're looking at people who are in the basketball world. Communication is the norm in a small group of 5 on and off the court in your teams, and for the majority of the girls there, they'll have all had a coach along the way who hasn't given them a voice, who hasn't asked, who's told them what to do. So whether that experience has been last year or 10 years ago, they've all experienced it, and they're kind of saying now, somebody really wants me to go in this direction with them, and then, oh gosh, look what's over here. So for example, if they share a little bit and they feel supported, then we go to the next step of it, and like there's loads of different examples, but given an opportunity to share, I think, is the biggest thing, because when they do, it's them, us getting a little bit of insight into their world and them feeling like they can do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, okay. All right. I think this is something that we need to carry on next week around the theme, because I think there's some really interesting stuff about this. How do you balance then leadership, and what does leadership look like, versus asking someone else's opinion? Well, you're just giving your leadership away now. The players are going to run everything. Well, I'm not saying that, but what does co-creation look like?
Yeah, gosh, that'd be great to explore.
Yeah. How far are we in? I think we're almost at rough time. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So
now, can you remember how people get hold of us?
Yes, they can. I practiced it. So find us on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube, but on Twitter, we're at Coach Convo, or you can email us, which some people have been doing and sharing their feedback and some scenarios that have cropped up that we're going to introduce in following sessions. And that's coachconversation@gmail.com. Got it right?
Nailed.
Yeah. I've also started to put up, or we've started to put up the calendar. So, I mean, it's calendar that started mid-month, but we'll leak it into January as it comes along. So check that out on our Twitter feed. We're putting in a person, a company, and a podcast for you to connect with, and keen to hear your thoughts if there's anyone that we miss out on.
Brilliant.
Have a great week.
Cool.
Bye.